All right, folks, how you doing? Welcome to Damascus in Cirencester, Part 3. So this will wrap up this little mini-series. Let's get right into it. Disclaimer, copyrights under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research, which is what we're doing. And we're going once again back into The Great Deception by Commons Beaumont. So, betokening a great age. Cirencester also boasted its basilica, 320 feet in length, similar to a Christian church, but with reverse orientation, of which part of its south wall remains in situ. It was possibly a temple of Apollo. It is believed that the city boasted a former hypocaust or baths, and it certainly possessed an amphitheatre. Among other finds were pottery, equestrian figures, earthenware with designs, many Celtic engraved stones and scrollwork, and also stone drainpipes. But perhaps the most instructive of all were paving stones deeply grooved by the wheels of chariots, betokening a great age. Carinium. We are told that the Romans gave it the name of Carinium, that Ravennas called it Carinium, and the Antontinus, how do you say this? Antonitus, Iter, Cornovium, but without going into the dubious question of its identification, its prehistoric name was Cirencester, or as will appear, Saron. The first half of its name is Siren, a variation of Saron, otherwise Sirion or Sirius, the sun represented by Apollo. This interpretation is confirmed by adjoining names of areas radiating from the city, as the historian Camden discerned. There is North Cerney, South Cerney, Cerneywick, and Sharncote, all within a radius of 3 or 4 miles from the centre of Siren or Saron. And we can see this here on Google Earth. The coat of arms of Cirencester. They all relate, excuse me, to the same intention, indicating that Cirencester was the city of the sun, hence, as in the Greek for explained earlier in this work. Helios represented not our great orb, the sun, but the star Sirius, deified in Apollo, the principal deity of the Britons, certainly from the time of the great catastrophe. The god Bel of Babylon. It is significant of the correctness of this identification that the present coat of arms of Cirencester, which may well has been acquired. It's terrible grammar, but anyway, ages ago, as in some other cities of Britain, is none other than the phoenix, represented like an eagle with a flory tresure. You can see the coat of arms there over on the right-hand side. The city of Helios, or Sirius. As is known, the phoenix was the emblem of the Sothic cycle, the one and only way of measuring the certainty of time derived from the movements of that most famous star in the universe, Sirius, which takes 1,461 years to complete its revolutionary course through the heavens. The phoenix is therefore the rightful symbol for the city of Helios, otherwise Sirius. It may be added that among the relics of prehistoric Cirencester was a tessellated paving stone of a zodiac. Here, then, may we acclaim as the ancient city of Heliopolis, in whose nomus the Egyptians included Hebron, or to use its Greek name, Egyptian Thebes, the city of Hercules. Saron, Salisbury Plain. Despite the survival of the name Saron as Salisbury Plain, it needs to be recognized that Saron formerly embraced the chalk country and included the Marlborough Downs. When King David grazed his flocks at Saron, it needs to be recorded that Gloucestershire and that same region was, and yet is, the great region renowned for its cattle and sheep. Herbert Evans says of Gloucestershire, Quote, for 600 years, the Cotswolds were a vast open door over which roamed thousands of sheep whose wool was famous throughout England. Basham was the biblical land of such stock. You can see the map there over on the right. It's not the best quality, is it? But, Google isn't everything. So here's the Cotswolds. Look at that. Beautiful country, isn't it? I'd love to go there, at the southwest of England. Uh, no wonder Beaumont's saying that this was the Garden of Eden. It'd be hard to argue. But there's different interpretations. I mean, there's lots of different authors who have different interpretations of where and what the Garden of Eden really was. I mean, Brensley Lapoire Trench says it was on Mars. David Icke says it was in the Middle East. Beaumont's saying it was in England. Who knows? Everyone has their own interpretation of such things. So the Philistines captured the ark. If it be conceded that the events recorded in the scriptures of these regions be correctly interpreted, it raises the question of Stonehenge, which one would have naturally supposed to be the city of the sun. Read in the scriptures that Shemed the Benjamite built Ono or On and Lod, and in distant days there were two, in fact, seemingly three places known as Beth Shemesh, the place or gate of the sun. At an early time in the days of Eli, the Philistines captured the ark and took it to Ashdod and set it in the house of Dagon or Poseidon, whose image was found fallen on its face, and on the second day his head and hands had been severed. The great stone of Abel or Abel. Is that Cain and Abel reference? Well, possibly, could be. In fear, therefore, they took the ark to Gath, where the people became consumed with a plague of hemorrhoids. By the way, that just means hemorrhoids. I looked it up. I don't know why I didn't just say hemorrhoids, but anyway. It was then sent to Ekron or Acharon, later Ptolemais on the Sea of Galilee, which also suffered with the plague. And it was finally taken in a cart to Beth Shemesh, on whose border the Philistines left it by the great stone of Abel or Abel, which may have been the famous Hell Stone in Stonehenge, and which lies at some distance from the circle. Oh, yeah, you can see it there on the right. From Beth Shemesh, the ark was sent to Karath Jerem, not far away, and finally was carried to Mizpah. That is Avebury, 1 Samuel 5, 6, 7, 1 to 7. It is possible, as Laud was Lida, that On was Stonehenge. Isis, the living goddess. And this is where I'm going to probably piss people off. Sir William Smith, in his Dictionary of the Bible, says that at On took place the worship of Hara, the abode of the sun, which name On, by a change in punctuation, becomes of N. Stonehenge lies near the Salisbury Avon, but in fact the Bristol Avon passes not far to the west of Cirencester. It may, however, be remarked how these strange idioms be regarded as the ancestors of the English tongue. The sun temple to On, according to Ptolemy, was On Ion, which can answer to One the One, signifying the only one God. Hara can be interpreted as the high ray, and the goddess Isis, in effect, may be resolved as Isis, that is the living goddess. And that's what you get in Star Wars. There's a lot of symbolism in Star Wars. I might do a series on that. I'm thinking about it. I'd have to do a bit more research and take notes and stuff like that. But there's a lot of mythology in Star Wars. And Rey, the character, to my mind, represents Isis, the living goddess. She also seems to be something of a stand-in for Venus, particularly in The Last Jedi. A lot of sea symbolism and all this. Venus came out of the ocean, you know. But yeah, really watch the Star Wars movies with educated eyes. Do your research into mythology. And people are always saying, oh, Rey's a Mary Sue, blah, blah, blah. All this. Oh, yeah, well, let's see. In A New Hope, Luke, a farm boy with an hour's training with Obi-Wan was able to blow up a super weapon. Star Wars has been ridiculous from the very beginning. there's nothing more ridiculous about Ray than there was about Luke. Watch the movies again, take the blinders off. Star Wars was my childhood. Not really. Nothing else happened in your childhood. One movie, that's it. That sums up your whole childhood. Nothing else happened at all. Okay. But no, there's no, in my mind, there's nothing more ridiculous about Ray than there was about Luke. Nothing at all. I mean, come on. You know? Or even if you want to go back to the prequels, Anakin, a 10-year-old, was able to blow up a control ship and win a war. Star Wars has always been ridiculous. There is nothing more ridiculous about Rey than anyone else, any of the other Skywalkers. I mean, come on, watch them again without the rose-tinted glasses. But yeah, Rey is a stand-in for Isis. Luke was a stand-in for Apollo. Leia was a stand-in for Diana or Artemis, and Darth Vader was a stand-in for Kronos and all that. I mean, it's just the recreation of mythology. That's all it is. The Star Wars is just mythology updated. And on the bottom right, you can see this kind of statue of Isis. But Star Wars, like, it's just mythology. That's all it is. We'll come back to that. Vespasian's presence. So the origin of the English language has long been a mystery. To transfer its beginnings to Scandinavia or Germany, as some do, is reversing its true course. It is a surprising fact that whilst for many years I collected every possible reference to Heliopolis and laboured for long under the natural impression that it related to Stonehenge, the facts eventually compel its relation to Cirencester. It is true that Vespasian's presence at Amesbury near Stonehenge is recorded, but so it is in relation to the area of Cirencester. You can see here on Google Maps that it's not too far distant. Anyhow, so you can see that Amesbury is not too far distant. So in the reign of Sesostris, the most ancient stones of Stonehenge are claimed as those of the inner circle, termed the Blue Stones, whose origin has been traced to the Preseli Mountains of Pembrokeshire, while the outer circle of 30 lintels or trilithons originally are sarsens evidently carried from the quarry at Amesbury, where hundreds of the same geological character still stand. When these were erected is an unsolved mystery. Mr. Frank Stevens, formerly curator of Salisbury Museum, estimated the Bronze Age circa 1800 to 1700 BC. For my part, I believe these later stones were carried overland from Avebury to Stonehenge in the reign of Sesostris, the pharaoh of the Exodus, 14th century BC. A priest of On. So this great king, realizing the growing power and ambition of the Assyrians and Persians, set out to take time by the forelock by overthrowing his rivals. And as a preliminary, being warned of the considerable number of unfriendly Hebrews in his dominions, or Hyksos, the Egyptians termed them, according to Manetho, had them rounded up and sent to Abaris or Avebury to work in the quarries. That was when Moses, a priest of On, killed an overseer and fled to Samothrace. The stones quarried were utilized for various purposes, including the enlargement of the temple to the sun at On. And check out what Michael Desarian and Ralph Ellis both say about this subject, about the Hyksos, Egypt. I would highly recommend Ralph Ellis. In fact, I've got most of his books over there on the shelf. Maybe get to him in the future. Maybe even try to contact him for an interview. That would be a good idea. Certainly get the numbers up. A fortified eastern frontier. On his return from his first expedition overseas, he imposed heavy taskwork on the resentful Hebrews and on his prisoners of war, including the Babylonians, who, says Manetho, rebelled. It is also said by the same Egyptian historian and priest that he fortified his eastern frontiers as far as Heliopolis. Lepsius observes, quotes, Manetho and Diodorus make Sesostris meet his treacherous brother at Pelusium, and from this place Sesostris fortified the eastern frontier as far as Heliopolis. The actual frontier seems to have been at Lechlade, 8 miles east of Cirencester, marked by standing stones. So you can see here on the map where Cirencester is and Lechlade on Thames, not too far distance. The Wansdyke. We may fairly estimate that this defence was because the pharaoh realised the approaching danger of invasion by the Assyrians and others from the east and the south. He set to work to erect a vast barrier known to us as the Wansdyke, with a special eye on the Avebury area, which stupendous undertaking explains the many mounds and camps he ordered to be erected. If this be so, it is noteworthy that whilst he was responsible for the reconstruction and enlargement of Stonehenge, he did not include it in his defensive plans, which admittedly was not militarily feasible without extending the Wansdyke for many more miles to the southeast. You can see here the Wansdyke frontier, the 10 plagues. So this explains the age-old mystery of the Wansdyke, although we actually have a clue in the name, but Woden or Odensdyke, or it was the northern name for Moses. Well, this is Beaumont's words, not mine. If you're getting upset about that, we will get into all of this with Odin's Thunder and the War on the West. I'll unpack all of it for you. It is wrapped up in the most stupendous crisis in the history of mankind, as this took place shortly prior to the Great Catastrophe, preceded by the 10 plagues, all of which, except the 10th, were affected by celestial circumstances. And if you want to know more about Beaumont's theory on that, check out the videos I put up about the riddle of the earth on this channel. Go into the podcast section. Got all the videos up and some with the mysterious comet, which I plan on going back to. This is all explained. Beaumont's theory essentially is that some of the worst epidemics and outbreaks of disease in the history of the planet were celestial in origin. They came from comets and meteorites and things like that. They're the things that bring pestilence to the planet. But as I say, go into the videos. The riddle of the earth explains all of this. Certainly an interesting theory. We learn that the phoenix appeared in the reign of Sesostris, which is only an occult allusion to the same event, for the mythic phoenix really recorded the Sothic cycle of 1,461 years, last completed in 1600, before that in AD 139, and before that in the reign of Sesostris in 1322 to 21 BC. And here's a reminder of what the 10 plagues actually were. The water turns to blood, the amphibians, the frogs, the gnats, the lice, the flies, disease on livestock, unhealed boils, hail and fire. It certainly sounds like a meteorite or a comet. Locusts, darkness, and the death of firstborn. So the deity of the underworld. Josephus mentions that Osiris was the god of Heliopolis, and there is little doubt that Osiris, made judge of the underworld, one who had been a mortal king, was the deified pharaoh Sesostris, traditionally destroyed in the Great Catastrophe, and who, by many scholars of this antiquarian age, identified with King Arthur. It is also in accordance with the debt owed to Sesostris and to his piety that subsequently Heliopolis revered him as the deity of the underworld. And going back to Star Wars on the top right, you've got Yoda, who's a stand-in for Osiris, because Osiris was the green man. They've just made Yoda a bit shorter. But, Dagobah, has the dark side tree where Luke gets his vision and all this. That represents the underworld. So like I say, Star Wars is just a recreation of old myths. And the image on the bottom right there is possibly the location of the amphitheater when the Romans turned it into Carinium, but also that could possibly be the round table of King Arthur, because there are King Arthur connections in Cirencester. I mean, it's possible that there was more than one round table. There's also the King's Knot in Stirling. There's also the theory that Arthur's seat in Edinburgh was named after King Arthur. Well, really? Arthur's seat might be named after King Arthur? You must be a fucking genius. Who do you think it's named after? Your great uncle Arthur, Or could it be the King of the Britons? Oh man, I've actually come across tour guys who say that's Arthur's Seat, but it's not named after King Arthur.
You must have been at the top of your fucking class.
And then the Pleasance, which is just to the side of it, was supposedly Camelot. I mean, there's King Arthur legends all over Britain, in Scotland, England, and Wales. Arthur's Seat's not named after King Arthur. The Sothic cycle. All the evidence, the Phoenix, the Sothic cycle, and Sirius goes to prove that Cirencester was the city of Helios primarily, not the sun as such, but Sirius, and that Sesostris may have been aware of this fact. It may appear surprising if in identifying these parts of Britain with the original Egypt and with Syria nearby that the most famous relic of the past, Stonehenge, formerly an astronomical temple of great sanctity, was nevertheless not the Heliopolis so prominent through the Bible ages. Yet the facts of the case speak differently, and as the historian, I can't but present the evidence without striving to fit sites wrongly into a preconceived belief. As the historian? Don't you mean as a historian? Anyway, so you've got the image there on the right. The Cirencester Phoenix, as you can see, it is all over the place. Very prominent in Cirencester. You've got bottles with the Phoenix on it. You've got antiques. You've got what looks like an old photograph or a postcard. It's on the buildings. This Phoenix really is everywhere in Cirencester. So Ephraim and Manasseh. I have said little of Damascus itself, which, according to Beaumont, was actually London, but sufficient to indicate that its situation and sphere of interest lay directly along the Great Midland Plain, the Thames Valley, extending to Cirencester and often much farther beyond. I might perhaps add that to the northwest, from Worcestershire to the Mersey region, was the area known later as Mercia, a name practically identical with Moesia, signifying in effect Moses' sphere of influence. In other words, here resided the tribes of Israel, Ephraim, and Manasseh. The Mercia region and coat of arms. And the great commercial mart, Damascus, the great commercial mart with its noted castle and its great river, its ports, its business in the trade of export and import, foodstuffs, wool, corn, and manufactured goods, stands out on its ancient site. The Damascus in the east, placed a considerable distance inland with no rivers, in no way corresponds with the facts of history. And there to the right, you can see two pictures of the River Thames and London. On the bottom right, you can see the Tower of London. London was one of the busiest ports in the world for centuries. So I think Beaumont's really onto something there. And when we go to the last slide here, this is from Google Earth. And when you go to Damascus and you type in Damascus Rivers or Damascus River on Google Earth, that's what comes up. Was Beaumont right? Was he wrong? I don't know either way, but seems in this case he may have had a point. Anyway, thank you very much for watching and take care.